Good morning. Good morning, Steluta. Good morning, Ash. Good morning, everyone. Please leave in the comments where you are from.
Hello, good morning, good evening, Ash. I think it's evening where you are now, right?
It is. It's just gone 5 o'clock in the evening. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for joining us today. Hi, Hafiz. Guys, please say hello here to us. Say hello to Ash and leave in the comments below where are you watching us from. It's really interesting to see you popping in and out and waving at us, asking questions, sharing various stories with us. We love to see you here in the comments.
Okay, I'm going to present. We have an amazing guest today who is Ash Rathod. He is a storyteller. So we will have a lot of stories to share with you today. He's a brand strategist also and a business coach. And storytelling has been, for business, became part of his life. And storytelling also is part of what we are doing, me and Steluta. We love stories, and we are here because of stories, because we believe that the stories can inspire change and empower others. So we would love to hear your story, Ash. So can you tell us more about your story and how did you get into this path?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, thanks for having me. And you know what? It feels really weird because I do these shows and interviews, so I'm usually talking to people. And one of the reasons why I started doing the show was um, is I'm very much an introvert. I'm very much I don't want the attention on me, so I very rarely do these kind of these shows where I'm being asked the questions and the spotlight, if you will, is on me. And one of the reasons why I did my own LinkedIn live was so I can have other people and kind of bounce off them, and so there's spotlights on them. So it's yeah, it's very interesting being on this side, but I do appreciate you reaching out to me and thank you very much. And I remember, Hanane, I think when I first started on LinkedIn, I first connected with you through a mutual friend of ours, Lucin, and we had a message. I don't know whether you remember, but I was actually having a look at the history of our messages. And the first message that it was obviously the introduction and said hi and everything. And
Mhm.
then you might have commented on one of my posts about trolls on my one of my content pieces. And and I had to apologize to you because I don't even know what I wrote, but I must have written something that went off on a bit of a rant. But you were on my side on those comments, so I DM'd you and I said thank you very much. Sorry for the rant, and your message back to me was brilliant because I think you'd been on LinkedIn a lot longer than me, and your message back to me was something like I don't know exactly what it was, the wording, but you just made me feel better about doing what I was doing and sharing my stories. And and it was that encouragement that you gave to me that just made the world. You know, it changed my mood that day, obviously, but also gave me a little bit more confidence as well. And that's one of the reasons why I do what I do on LinkedIn. I share my story. And it started off from a post a while back, which I'll get into, but it kind of changed the perception of what LinkedIn was for me, a place where
Mhm.
I connect with like-minded people, where I share my story, I hear their stories, and it helps us collectively grow together. And that's the kind of people that I actively sought into having my kind of ecosystem. And that's what I encourage today. Um, so yeah, going back, I mean, I can go way back if you like, but how I got into storytelling, I think all children, right, are into stories. They're more creative than adults are, I believe. When we're growing up, we kind of play make believe. We want to be, I don't know, an astronaut or a fireman or something else. Like as a boy growing up, me, something else. You kind of see yourself as something. For me, it was I wanted to be a Hollywood director at a very early age.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, so
Amazing.
I had six brothers. Well, I have six brothers still, and one sister. So we had quite a full household growing up, and we used to, yeah, we used to have dreams of doing stuff, and we were all very quite creative growing up, and I think that comes from my mum, and she really used to encourage us being creative, and because one thing growing up in a household or raising a number of boys, she had to make sure that we entertained ourselves a lot
Yeah.
of times, and that's what we did. We kind of we I remember there was a game that we used to play when we were younger. We used to a few of us would make a film or a play for each other, while someone or a couple of others would wait in another room. So we'd make believe and we'd create stories, or we'd make stories and we'll entertain each other. Um, and I think as you grow older, that also never stops. I feel like or a lot of children are like that, but I think adults are like that. Maybe we just repress or suppress, sorry, that creativeness in us. But I think all of us are storytellers naturally. You're we want to be something else, or we see ourselves in other people, whether it's kind of movies or books or people online, and we relate to other people's stories, and it helps us grow. It helps us connect. It helps us create really strong bonds, and I don't think that's ever left me. Fast forward anyway to kind of university days. um I did media communications, and I specialized in script writing. So I still had that thing. I wanted to do films and writing. So I spent a lot of time really studying how scripts were written and how characters were formed in plots. And, I studied a lot of narrative arcs and things like that. And it was specifically around the entertainment side of things. Um, and I wrote a lot of scripts as well. I wrote a lot of scripts. My final dissertation was a 90-minute film script. And that's kind of how I really got into it. And then after university, I wanted to move into getting into the film world and the TV production side of things. So I moved. So I found a job, and it was at a TV company. It was one of the terrestrial channels here. This was way before Netflix and Sky. We had pretty much like three or four channels on TV, and that was it. And one of them I went to work for, and it was actually a sales role, but my plan was to get into TV through any door possible, and then hopefully get into production. But life just had it that I didn't get into the TV production side. I didn't get into the writing side, although that's where my love was. I stayed in sales, and I was really good at sales, and I really enjoyed it as well. So that's kind of where my career went up, and I totally not forgot about. I still obviously enjoyed movies, and loved reading, and even on the side, I'd still write as well, but never really chased it as a vocation, and the thing that I wanted to do, because I was just busy with my sales role. And then, yeah, I moved into from storytelling for entertainment to storytelling for business. So, and that's kind of what I do now. I own an agency. I'm fortunate to have a small team. It's a creative agency. We do a lot of kind of creative work, whether it's design, copywriting, tone of voice for corporate companies. And yeah, that this company actually that company started from a point of you know a point where I wasn't in a great space. I lost my job, and I decided to set up my company. I kind of vowed then, quite rebellious I was in that. Like, I don't want to ever work for anyone else again. I've had
Yeah.
my fair share of being messed about. And I can't, and I kind of glad I did. And it was probably a little bit later than I should have, but everything happens for a reason.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Well, I just realized that we can hire you as a script writer for the Fast and Resilient show.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just joking. So maybe the people here who are listening to you, they would like maybe somehow to learn how to use storytelling in what they're doing. And since we are also talking about resilience, because you see, what triggers me is how each one of us tell his story or her story. You see, the way we talk about ourselves, it reflects who we are. It reflects how we feel about. It's like when we watch a movie. We watch a movie, and at the end, we all say somehow, "Oh, that was a great story. Oh, that was
Mm.
a sad story." So, what about your story? Or I'm telling this to the audience. What about your stories? So you see how when you share your story, it can tell also about your experience, your values, how you handle your challenges, how you handle your struggles and everything. And I am talking about this because I was that person in the very beginning where I told very badly my story, like that showed a lot of pain, a lot of struggling, I mean, a lot of things going on. So, but today I share my story in a different way. So the way we talk about our stories can tell also about our character and about our level of resilience. So can you share how we can, maybe you are more skilled in storytelling, how these people who are listening to you, they can use their storytelling to share their own stories and give this good, I don't know how to say it, maybe Steluta, if you would like to add something, or maybe how they can use storytelling to make an impact reflecting a negative image about
Yeah.
themselves.
I think what you're looking for is how do you tell your story in an empowering way instead of playing victim and complaining. And I think it's about, because as we are, both of us, we are professional coaches, right? And we are trained to listen for words. You are trained to write words. We are trained to listen for words. And for us, the way a client speaks tells us about where he or she is in regards to also not only the journey but also the healing process of whatever is working through, right? So I think the question probably is, how do you shift your language so that you shift your inner energy, and instead of complaining and being a victim, you transition to an empowering, a self-empowering and empowering others mode? I guess probably that's what you were looking
Yeah,
for.
yeah. I mean, I think Ash, he got my message,
Yeah,
because
I totally.
the way we tell our story can also reflect our energy, reflect a lot of things about us. And we listen to a lot of stories, either through this show or to the people we coach or to our clients. And we always sense also, we are not only listening, but we are trying also to sense the energy behind the words just to understand the patterns behind those words and so on. So, what would you add? I mean, how people can use storytelling in their lives to make an impact instead of just like share a story, what most
Yeah,
people
no,
do.
I totally understand where you're coming from, and yeah, thanks for kind of getting into detail with that question. But first and foremost, I never feel like anyone's complaining when they tell their story. Like, you can have there's different ways of sharing your story online, and yeah, you can tell stories so that it's therapeutic for yourself, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Um, but a lot of the time as well, when there's a change and the transformation that happens within that story, you're going to empower other people. You're going to impact other people that way. So what I tend to do is when I'm going through certain issues. Like, for example, my first story that I ever posted on LinkedIn was actually a therapeutic post. And I didn't see that as moaning. I saw that as a vessel to better myself. I didn't even have an agenda. So it was good, what, 20 months ago. My first ever post was about my skin condition, my vitiligo. I've not always had this skin condition. It kicked off through a very stressful time of mine. And for those who know my story, probably have heard this story and seen this post a few times. But what they probably don't know is that when I actually wrote that post, which was naturally in a story structured way, because that's how I'm used to writing and that's, my training, but that's just comes naturally to me. I actually posted that as advice to other people, but really it was advice to myself. It was like me holding a mirror in front of me and almost saying, right, you need to get out of this zone that you're in. And the zone that I was in at that time was of a real low confidence. My mental health was suffering because of my condition, as well as of load of other things that I won't go into detail, but it's kind of very personal stuff that was happening in my life, stressful time with my business as well. And my wife then used said to me, "You need to go and speak to someone. You need to go and get professional help," because she knew what the type of person that I was. I'm very close to my wife. I speak to her about a lot of things, but I was the type of person that didn't like to talk about my problems because I thought it would just exacerbate them. It wouldn't
Mhm.
solve them. I think totally different now, but that's what how I thought about it. So what I ended up doing was I listened to my wife and I knew she was right, but I didn't really want to go and speak to people, anyone about it. So I decided to just write about it, and I don't know what came over me at that time, but I decided to write a post on LinkedIn. I said, I'm going to write this out on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I don't really care about. I don't know why I thought that. All my clients were on it. A lot of my friends were on it, but I felt like, it's just a platform that I don't really care about, and I'm just going to write it and post this story about what I was going through, but I was talking to as if I was talking to other people, as a bit of advice. And then I wrote it and I sent it, hit publish. I had under 1,000 followers at the time. And as soon as I hit send, I thought, oh my God, what have I done? Like, there are people there I know, and, all that, the
I
fear
remember that
started.
post. I remember
Yeah,
that post. Yes.
exactly. And then um the next day was that's when I told you off air that LinkedIn literally changed my life in terms of help me out of this confidence lull, or lack of confidence. And I had so many lovely messages and comments, and I realized that that posted something like 85,000 views at the time, and for someone with under 1,000 followers who was getting something like 400 views per post, it just opened my eyes. One, to I had a different idea of what LinkedIn was, but more importantly, it changed my perception of the people on LinkedIn. And in hindsight now, people are just people everywhere. And like once you start being a little bit more vulnerable and sharing the real you, you see the real people coming kind of, attracted to you or magnetized to you within that ecosystem. And I just felt like from that day, I was like, right, I need to tell more of these stories, not just to help myself, but to just inspire and help other people as well, aside from business. And that's kind of what my values are based on, and I'll never kind of stray away from that lane. Going back to your question then, how do you tell your own story? I can get really technical here, and I can I can share kind of a framework that I use, but it's nothing new. It's something that I learned from the script writing days. If anyone wants to Google these people that I got inspired from, Joseph Campbell, Dan Harmon's story circle, even going back to Aristotle's or Freytag's pyramid. Every
Yes.
story has a beginning, middle, and an end. And over time, I've tried to simplify these frameworks to four elements, which is pretty much storytelling. And storytelling is character that has a desire to get something or achieve something, whether it's an internal or an external thing, mainly internal. Um, but there's always some kind of conflict that happens. And when they overcome that conflict, that's when a transformation happens. So that's the very simple framework is a character plus desire plus conflict plus transformation. Now, you can use all of those elements in that order, or you can use some of those elements. But I think the main thing for me is always about transformation, and it's always about that internal transformation that happens. So now a lot of the stories that I do write out there is not they're not therapeutic stories. They're not just for me. They're stories of what I've done in the past. So it inspires people that are going through it now, and it helps them for their future. Because
Hmm.
once you start telling these stories, just like when you watch a movie or when you read a book, and if you do it properly and you elicit the emotion, the right triggers, and the right ways of telling the story, people actually emotionally experience that story as if that character in that story is them. So then it becomes less about you. And that's why I wrote a post this morning as well. I see a lot online with personal stories getting a bad rap because, a lot of people that dislike personal stories, they feel like, oh, it's very self-centered and it's egotistical. And actually, no, it's not. Because if someone reading that story is going through something that they need help with, like you were back then, and sees what is possible and that transformation is possible, I think that's the best type of content that you can put out there because you've
Exactly.
actually helped someone or helped people to do or be inspired to do what you've done in the past.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing because this is true. Well, I read a lot of stories from your posts and they are very inspiring. And many times when I wrote posts about my story, I had a lot of engagements. And I believe that people need to read these kind of stories, not because just we go there and would like to share a story, because the way we share that story is the most important thing. And the just when I share the post, it's not about just like um, sharing facts or the story itself. I also share what I learned from that story, and
Mm,
that's why it gets to inspire others. Uh, I know that a lot of people struggle. I know that a lot of people have different stories to tell, but the way also we write and the learning we get from these challenges is what makes a difference. And you see, I've been on LinkedIn for many years and I've been even analyzing why some posts have more engagement than others. And I realize whenever I talk from the heart, and
mhm.
whenever there are emotions that are engaged, I see people more also engaged to my post.
Yeah.
And which also means that somehow, even if we are on a professional platform, people would like to connect heart to heart.
Right.
And this is why also business today, even if it's professional, they share stories. And we know also the science behind sharing stories. And I also use the triangle of Aristo when I am writing because it's not only about what you know or your expertise or your credibility, but it's also about emotions and stories behind that. So yeah, if you are listening and I mean, this is a message to our audience, and the most important thing is not just to go and share your story, but also to share what you learned from that story, and how can you empower others to learn from that story. Because those people who read these stories, maybe they see themselves, because I had a lot of people in the past telling me, oh my god, when you write, it's like you are writing about me. I see
Mm.
myself in what you are writing. And people, when they see themselves in what you are writing, or what I am writing, or what Steluta writes, then they are empowered more. So yeah, it's amazing. The
If you're
story.
getting those, if you're getting those type of comments, you're telling story well. You're doing storytelling really well, because that is the aim of the game. That is what you want to aim for, is for someone to emotionally experience that journey, that story, as if it was themselves. And I talk about narrative transportation as well. There's certain things that you do where it's whether it's eliciting emotion through the detail that you write about and from the heart. You can't beat that, because it's like, it's always the truth, and that truth shines through your words, and that when people actually feel it. So narrative transportation is the phenomenon that is just simply that people actually are absorbed into that scene that you've written about, the same as we do again in films and books. So adding those details, adding honesty, being really vulnerable about how you feel about those moments, and then how you felt afterwards as well, are all of those things that we should be doing in stories. And I think a lot of people hold back because we don't want to be so vulnerable. And there's a caveat to all of this as well. You should only share as much as you're comfortable with sharing. I'm not saying that every post has to be a tearjerker, every post has to be something that you're kind of just talking about all sorts of emotions just for the sake of it. Have a point to it all, and have a reason, and think about that journey of what you went through and what potentially someone else might be going through, and how it will help them. Because the end goal is, that's you probably heard it from books like, I don't know, Donald Miller. He talks about it a lot. It's like the real hero of your story is not you, it's always your audience. You're actually, even when you're the central protagonist in the story, you
Mhm,
always got to remember that the real hero is the reader of that story.
mhm. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, so true. And before you read the comment and the question, Hanan, I just wanted to emphasize something that both of you touched upon. The fact that here on this platform, because I've heard many times the comments and people saying, this is a professional network. Why are people sharing these stories that are so personal? It is a professional network, but it's a professional network where professional people spend their time. It's not just a CEO, or it's not a title that spends time there. It's a person that's behind the title that connects with you. So even if you're looking for a job, or you're looking for business, to grow your business on this platform, bear in mind the fact that you are talking to people, and the more genuine you are in sharing your story, and the more transparent you are, and not just posting titles and achievements, but talking about your challenges or your story getting there, the more the better the chances for you to find your people there, and to build your business, to find the job that you're looking for. So despite the fact that it's a professional network, it's not just for sharing titles. It's for sharing and creating connections, real connections with the people behind the titles that we all see on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
I can relate to that, because today resilience, it's not about professional and personal. Resilience, it covers all dimensions of life. So if you are struggling at the personal level, it for sure will impact your career, your health, everything around you. So even if we are on LinkedIn on a professional platform, doesn't mean that we cannot share our stories, because it depends on how we share the story itself. As I said, it depends on how you write this story and how you approach it. So if you would like to share the story, and then maybe for the sake of empowering others, and then maybe yeah, everyone can do it, but not everyone do it anyway, because there is the story itself and there is daring. The question is, do you dare to share your story?
Yeah.
So
Can I also on that point as well? You know, what I mentioned about it's like how vulnerable do you actually want to get? So I work with someone and I've worked with them for a while. He's I can't take for credit for his writing now because he's an amazing writer, but he's always writes on brand. He basically helps managers become leaders, and he never really shares any really personal, vulnerable stories. But what he does do, he takes story elements, and what I mean by story elements is those human themes, those human emotions that he puts in his post. And he never always used to do that. A lot of his post was actionable, and he was doing well, and he was doing really well. And then it was that one post where he added a little bit more human elements to it, and that post just absolutely went viral. It did 1 million impressions, more than I've ever got on any of my posts. And but all of these people, they were pe- people that were in his business ecosystem. They were managers wanting to become leaders, but he touched on the human elements that brought them in, and that's the story elements that we talk about. You know, he
mhm.
talked about people crying in one-to-ones. He talked about people having issues with illnesses, people being disappointed with him, and then he done that as a second time as well. And this was just for me, just blew my mind. He done another post again on brand, again those kind of elements that we talk about. That did over 100,000 reactions, not impressions, reactions. And that the impressions that got him was 9.1 million from one post.
Oh wow.
So basically, what happened with that was they got drawn in because of what he was sharing. It was on brand, it was on business, but then people started tagging other people, and then it just blew and blew and blew. And even now, you know, he's just overwhelmed by it. He got lots of business out of that, lots of leads. He sold a book out of that, sold a course because of that one post. So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying money is everything and business is everything, because it's a fine balance. But for those that think that, does storytelling and being vulnerable and having the storytelling help, will that help my business? Of course it does. It's proven, not just
Yes.
from me, not from just my clients, not just people that I work with, but from companies from, you know, decades, generations ago. It's a proven fact that storytelling does work.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember one day I wrote a post that I think in one day I had more than like 30,000 views, something like that. And the only thing that I said in that post is that I started on this platform with a struggle, with a pain, and I just wanted, in every day I write and I post, it was a way for me to keep going on my journey and not to give up on myself.
Mm,
That post was for empowering others, but that was also a message to me every day to keep going and not to give up on myself. Because I remember there were days like a couple of years ago where I was really feeling bad, and then the only connection that I had, I mean, not the only one, but connecting through LinkedIn and writing and having these comments coming back, positive comments, encouragements, that made a difference in really in my life, and that kept me going. And that's why posting was not just writing something or writing about story, but it was a commitment to me to keep going and not to give up on myself.
mm,
And you see, but it's amazing. You said something, well, when you are also honest about what you write, and when you are fully emotionally engaged in what you are writing, somehow people, even if they don't know you, they feel that. And I had a lot of comments on like, we feel that what you write is sincere, and so on. So yeah, I mean, there is no magic, in fact, in getting engagement. But the thing that people don't understand is that maybe they understand, but they're unable to do that, is to write from the heart, because sometimes people, they just fear the perception of others. They are, and they don't want to be judged by people. They don't want to be judged by the people they work with, and that's why they
Mhm.
just stay in their small cocoon, and then they just want to be protected, and at the end they're not really protected, because they keep being in their minds, and they're struggling in their minds. Yeah,
Right.
so
Yeah.
Yeah, so true. And I would like to ask you the question that we have from Hemant here. At one time in your past life, you have had bad experiences in one situation. How you feel and how you face that challenge? Is anyone help you? Please share your past experience with us. So I think you've already shared some, but it would be really great to share more stories if you still have
Oh,
time to
in your
spend with us
past
here.
life, you had a bad experience in one situation. How you feel and how you face that challenge. Did anyone help you? Please share your past experience with us. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I posted about was obviously my skin condition. That's one of the main things. Um, when I actually first started my business was because I wasn't doing so well in a sales role that I was in. I was working in corporate, and I had a bad situation in the. It was the recession global recession in 2008, 2009, and I was out selling. It was a hard job anyway because we were in a recession and we were trying to sell to people that were um they didn't really have the money, and a lot of people were kind of struggling with money. And I just didn't feel right with the solution that I was selling to people. So the bad experience for me in that situation was that I went to my manager and said I can't sell to this person, but because it was a very money orientated, it was the bottom line, target orientated environment, or the manager was at least that way. I he kind of forced me to sell, and I did actually sell to that person, and I actually wrote a post about this as well. But the next day I just didn't feel good about it because I remember speaking to this person who had a young family. His business was about to go broke, and but he trusted me, and I sold to him. So the next day, um, how I faced that particular challenge was just I listened to my gut feeling, and that's kind of a lot what I do these days anyway. Even when writing or anything that I do, I do listen to my gut feeling, and I usually go with that. I don't know if that's always a good thing, but it's always worked for me. And at that point, what I did was I told the person I sold to cancel the sales, to phone my customer service company, and I said it's not a good thing, it's not a great thing. Obviously my manager wasn't happy with that, but it made me feel really good, and that was my inner transformation. I didn't want to sell my soul. I felt much better for it. I actually did end up losing my job because of it for a few months down the line, but the good things happen from bad situations, in that that's the point where I said, I'm starting my own business and I'm going to do things my way, and I'm going to treat people the way I want to be treated. It wasn't easy, but 14 to 15 years on, here I am now, and I'm still within that business. I've got a small team, and I do exactly that. I treat people how I want to be treated. So that good, yeah, I suppose that's a bad situation. Reading that question again, how I faced that challenge was I went with my gut feeling. Expect that it's not going to be an easy ride. Life is just not like that. But I'm a big believer in things happening for a reason, and you
yes.
do get through things like that.
Yeah, I love that. Nothing happens like that, or everything has a reason. And
Mm,
I personally, when I am challenged, and this is something I learned because I had a lot of challenges in the past, is that instead of panicking and starting to think, oh, why this happened to me? What's the reason behind this? And blah, blah, blah. I focus, okay, now what can I do? What's the solution? How can I get out from this situation? Well, who are the people who can help me? What do I have? What resources I have that I can help me, and move on? You see? And then you can also see what you can control. I mean, within this questioning, you can check if what you're thinking about is something you can control first or you don't control, because a lot of people, they put their energy in things they don't control instead
Yeah.
of focusing on the things they can control. So ask yourself if this situation that is happening is within your control, because it's about people or situations or circumstances, things that you cannot control. Then you are losing your time. So focus on what you can control. Get into the solutions. Ask for help, and then move on.
That's a very good point as well, and it's one that I do remind people of, including myself as well. Is that storytelling starts with the stories you tell yourself, right? So
Exactly.
whatever that's in your head is not happened yet. There might be a possibility that might happen, but it's not actually happened yet. It's the stories that you tell yourself. You can easily tell yourself. I say easily with a take that with a pinch of salt, but you can definitely change that story you tell yourself, and it will inform the outer actions as well. And you made a really good point there, Hannon, as well. It's like you don't have to face challenges and problems all by yourself. You can speak to friends, you can speak to people. You've got, brilliant coaches like yourselves that you can reach out to and speak to. But there's no shame in, and I've learned that late in life, there is absolutely no shame in talking to people. And I go back to that story about my skin condition where my wife was much wiser person than me, saying that I need to speak to someone and I didn't. And only when I wrote that post, I realized how right she was, because I had so many conversations. And the more I shared about my problems, the more help I got as well. So that's a very important point. Make sure you don't try to solve things yourself if you can't.
It
Absolutely.
it is so important for us to understand that we evolved as a species, right? In a supportive group. No one got where they got by being alone, right? For us as a species, being alone meant actually death throughout the evolutionary cycle. So you're not alone. Remember that you're not alone, even if you're alone in your house, even if you're alone in your office and you're struggling through something, there's always someone out there who's been what you're going through these days and who can help you for sure, even only by holding spaces. Many times coaches or therapists do, right? Just by holding the space for you to open up and to share whatever is bothering you, whatever is creating the suffering inside you. So I think this is such a great point for people to remember. And I think what has happened over the past 2.5 years created more conversations around people getting together and sharing their pain and suffering. And I think this is probably one of the best outcomes that came out of COVID, right? There's more talk about mental health, there's more talk about vulnerability, there's more talk about leading from a heart, not from KPIs and from with the bottom line at the forefront.
Return on investment.
Exactly.
Mm.
So just before we go, because I think we're quite past our time, just wanted to acknowledge, Hafiz, Peter from Huntsville, Benaisa, Semi from Morocco. We have from Netherlands people here. David from Boston, James from Alabama, Karim, hi, Ivona, hi, Ivona, Marco, thank you, Marco, for joining us this week as well. Dr. Mansour from India, we have Hani from Tunisia, Randy from Austin, Texas, from Turin, someone, Ambreen, hi, Ambreen, our friend, thank you for joining us. Glenn from England, so many people, Hemant here, who gave us also the question, contributed to this. Thank you for contributing to this. We have Peter, we have so many people joining us from all over the world. It's so gorgeous, so beautiful to have you guys here. It gives us more fuel to keep on going with this and sharing stories, our stories and other people's stories to support you in whatever you're going through as well, and to see that you're not alone here, right? In this, in whatever you're going through, you're never alone. Just open to receiving, and you will receive.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Ash, for accepting this invite and accepting to be vulnerable and talking from the heart. I know you do that greatly, and the reason your posts are inspiring, and I'm one of the fans who take time to read your posts. So thank you again, and then see you next week.
But before we
Thank-
go, just where can people find you, right? So
Yes.
if you can share with us where they can
So,
reach out to you.
yeah, so LinkedIn is probably the best thing. The place I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I've got my website, which is the corporate side of things, Digital Focus Creatives, but it's mainly LinkedIn. And there are a few things that are happening in the background in terms of me setting up a new business, but I'll announce that on LinkedIn anyway. But generally, I just love connecting with people and having conversations online. And LinkedIn is definitely the place that it's happening.
Thanks, Ash. Thanks everyone for joining, for listening to our stories today. Feel free to reach out to Ash, to Hanane, to myself on LinkedIn. Until next Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, stay safe, be well, enjoy this summer, and see you next Tuesday.
Yeah. And Ash, stay with us. Yes.
I will do.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone. Bye.